One stencil, two techniques, and a bonus idea. Are you ready? Do you need some inspiration to stretch your background stencil for a new look? Today I've got two cards and they're both made using very similar products, but using different stencil techniques. So you're going to get a unique look every time. And this is going to help you get more from your stash. And a background stencil is very versatile. So the first technique I'm going to be sharing with you today is to create a shadowed effect. So today I've got this leaf. It's a repeated pattern style stencil, but you can do this technique with so many different kinds of patterns or even images. You could use it as well. So what I'm doing here is I've chosen a very light grey ink and I've laid the stencil down and I'm adding some colour through the stencil just like you normally would using this light grey ink. Now this is going to be what will create my shadow. So if you want to use a different colour, now's the time to do that. You can do this with any combination of colours that you want. Next it's time to lift the stencil and shift it slightly. Now because I want my shadow to be on the lower right side of the image, I have lifted my stencil only just slightly so that I've got a white gap evenly all around the upper left side of the pattern from the stencil. So I've shifted the image basically up and to the left slightly. And the next thing I'm going to do to step up this one single background stencil is to add multi-layer inking. Now I'm going to do this on both of the cards and I'll walk you through it. Rather than just put one color through the stencil, this is where you can really add some depth and dimension without any bulk. And it's a really great way to stretch your stash. So I've chosen some greens here today and they're from a family of inks. You can mix any colors that want to play nicely, and if you're not sure if they do, you can always test them off on a scrap piece of paper first. But typically I will start from my lightest color and then work towards my darkest. Now because this is a leaf style image, I'm focusing the darker portion of the ink in the center of the stencil leaves. That's going to make the leaf look like it's got more dimension. And the other thing that's going to make it look like it's got even more dimension is that shadow that we've created. I'm using dye inks here today, so there will be a little bit of transparency to them, so you potentially will see that background layer of grey ink through the green inks. If you're wanting more of an opaque look, then I would recommend using pigment inks, and I would wait for each layer to dry before you add the next. And I'm working on a grid mat here that's just going to help hold everything in place. And to remove the panel from the grid mat, it's easiest to actually bend the mat rather than bend the cardstock. If the cardstock does get warped, you can run it through a die cutting machine to flatten it out. But look at that depth and dimension. Now it's time to walk you through the second technique before we assemble our cards. Oh, and we've got that bonus technique coming up too. And we're cheating here a little bit today because we're doing a tone on tone. So we've already got one layer of color down and that's going to give us a colored background instead of a white background. And this cardstock is a nice bright green. So I'm making sure to use a darker green for my first layer. If you've got a color that's too similar and you're using a tone on tone effect, you are going to lose that effect totally because you won't be able to see the color. Once it dries, it will be a little bit lighter. So if you're not sure, then check on a scrap piece of the colored cardstock first and give it a few minutes to dry, and that'll give you the final idea of what the color is going to look like. And if you're wanting a real subtle effect, maybe just do one color, but we're stepping it up here today and I'm layering all three colors together through the one stencil to give it dimension. And I'm going all out here. When it comes to the last color, the very dark one, this is going to really add that wow factor because it is so dark compared to the other colors. And I did decide to cut this panel down because I want a white border on my card and we're going to step it up a little bit. So it was easier for me to do this before I came in with my bonus technique here, which is to do some selective stenciling. Now, using stencil paste slows things down typically because you do need to wait for it to dry. I didn't want to wait for each section to dry. I only want to stencil through the little dots of the pattern here, and it was easier for me to create a little mask with some, you can use any sort of post-it note tape, masking paper, and mask off the sections that you don't want to get the paste onto to make it easier. I have chosen a small palette knife here, which does help, but it's never going to be perfect when it comes to paste. You are going to get those little bits that will get seep through the edges or get in an area that you don't like, and I'll show you shortly how I remove that. But by doing this little mask, I was able to do each section without having to wait for each section to dry. I could literally just lift off the mask and place it over the next little area, or the 3 dots that I wanted to add the paste to. And when the mask got too manky, too wet, I just grabbed some clean post-it note tape and did it with that. And then of course you always love the big reveal when it comes to a stencil, but I think it's even better when it comes to using stencil paste. That big reveal does have a wow factor. And here's how I remove any excess paste. I just use a craft knife and a little bit of patience and scrape it away. You can probably see it a little bit, but it's a handmade card, that's fine. It's time to assemble our cards now, and I'm starting with the very first background that we made. I thought it'd be fun to add a beautiful, bold, bright flower. I am using the same tones on the leaves. I've used the coordinating cardstocks to the inks, and the inks to add some depth to these images in the same colored cardstocks, but they're the next layer up, like they're the darker inks, so that when they dry, they can be seen. And I did add a little bit of extra dimension just by rolling the petals of the flowers and the leaves over the round barrel, and this is just the perfect picker. You can use any pen or pencil, anything that you have to do this. And once I'd layered up my flower, I could grab a sentiment. I've got a coordinating die for this sentiment, so I could pop that up. I love dimension. You don't have to add the amount of dimension that I do to my cards. These would look amazing just layered flat on the card front as well, and that's going to help with keeping the postage costs down. Another thing I want to mention about a busy, bold background like I have on both of today's cards is that if you're struggling to create a focal point, a die cut shape such as a circle that I've done here on both the cards today really helps give the eye somewhere to rest and find that sentiment, find the elements, and then make it easier to create a balanced project without being a little bit overwhelming. And you can decorate these as little or as much as you like. These backgrounds are beautiful enough just to add a big bold sentiment to, and leave it at that. I just love flowers, just in case you didn't know. Alright, speaking of flowers, I decided on my next design to choose a small, like it's a similar flower to what the shape of the stencil pattern is, but you could use any little flower, even just a circle like a dot flower would be really pretty too. And I've cut out enough to have one for each of the leaf images on the card front. Now I'm just adding the panel now that the paste is dry to the front of the card. I'm using some 1/2 inch double-sided tape, lining it up, pressing on the corners that have the release tape lifted so that it holds perfectly once I've got my placement sorted. And then I can just remove the release tape. So this background is going to be quite busy, and if you wanted to, just one simple line sentiment would look lovely, like kind of near the bottom of this design or even in the center. But I wanted to step it up and create something that kind of made the background a part of the design, but that it didn't get overwhelmed. So these flowers are basically helping to build on the pattern that we've already created with the multi-inking and with the paste, with that selective paste, embossing paste. And for the sentiment, rather than die cut it with the coordinating die, I thought I'd use that focal point idea again. And I've got one of the circle dies here, one of the nesting circles, to cut that out. You could leave it at this, and it really does show off that background stenciling and all that work that you've done. But I wanted to take it a step further, and I've decided to bring some black and white butterflies. So these are line art, they're not coloured. Because there is so much colour and design in the background, just having these couple of line art images helps make the background a major part of the focus, but it does bring something else to the card design. So all together now we've got the very first stencil technique where we did the multi-inking to add depth through just one stencil, but we also came in and added a shadow using a light grey ink first. And on the second design we did the same multi-inking, but this time we started with some coloured cardstock and added that selective embossing pasting. Embossing paste? So let me know in the comments below. Do you have a favourite card here today? And are you going to try either of these techniques? And if you want more stenciling ideas, don't go anywhere. I've got 2 more videos for you here, and I look forward to seeing you there. If you did like today's video, don't forget to click on that thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? It's totally free. I look forward to seeing you back here again real soon. Until next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.